happy Tuesday. Today is the third in our series about the menstrual cycle. I am just waiting for Evie to join and request to come on in. I'm gonna wait for her today, so hopefully we have no technological issues as well, because I know we've had some technological issues the last two times of having her be able to go, hi, thank you for joining. I'm just waiting for Evie to join us as well. Here she is. Hopefully she has just requested to enter. I'm gonna accept it. It works out well. Okay. All right. I did accept it. Here we go. No technical issues today. Wonderful. Yay.
Yay.
So glad to see you today. I'm excited. Today's kind of the fun one, right?
Yeah, for sure. So excited to be here, Lindsay. And it's great to have no issues getting on. That's wonderful. Third time's a charm, evidently.
Third time's a charm. Next time I just wait for you to join so I don't ask you to join.
Yeah.
Well, it looks like we're having quite a few people joining today. That is awesome. Today is the third in our series. I can't believe next week will already be our last in this four-part series around the Enneagram and the menstrual cycle. And today is all about the ovulation phase, but we thought we would both go in and just introduce ourselves again quickly, talk a little bit about where we are in our menstrual cycle, and then hop right into talking about ovulation. Well, I will start. My name is Lindsay Frazier. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, as well as a certified sex therapist, an IA accredited professional out of Minneapolis, Minnesota, where I specialize in relationships and sexuality, utilizing the Enneagram. And I am an Enneagram type 9 with a wing of 1, and I am social dominant with the sexual instinct in the last position. So interestingly enough, talking about menstrual cycles, my menstrual phase decided to come 2 days early. So I was supposed to be in later luteal phase, and then I got the surprise of an early menstrual phase yesterday. So it would kind of threw me off. I mean, on a positive note, I didn't feel anything because we had talked a little bit about sort of how I've been doing acupuncture and some of these herbal Chinese medicine. Again, everybody should talk to their doctors about that, but this has actually been huge for me. It was like a surprise. I was like, oh, you're a little early, but like no menstrual pain, no thought that it was coming. So I will take that if it's going to decide to come a little bit early. So I'm actually in day 2 of my menstrual phase then. So even though it's supposed to be like day 22 or 23 or something like that luteal phase. So that is where I am. Physically, probably the best menstrual phase yet. I feel pretty good. I'm a little bit like tired, but that's kind of it as far as like what I have been feeling. But let's move over to having Evie introduce herself and then talk a little bit about where she is in her menstrual phase as well.
Oh, thanks, Lindsay. Let's celebrate this moment though, because this is such a beautiful moment actually for all of us who bleed. It's actually really common to have period pain, but it's not normal. And actually we should be experiencing pain-free menstruation always. And so this is like a huge moment for people to kind of like see you in this moment where you're not having any pain. And actually, you know, I've had pain-free periods before in my life as well. This is normal. This is what normal periods can look like. And so if you're someone that really struggles with period pain, absolutely, as Lindsay said, you know, talk to your own doctor, but definitely maybe learn about acupuncture and Chinese medicine and herbs, because I think for both of us it's been pretty life-changing for sure. But that's so cool to hear about. I feel, yeah, what a journey. Wow. But hello, my name is Evie. I'm the type guide, and I am a menstrual cycle Enneagram coach. So I love to work with people who bleed using the modality of the Enneagram to support themselves. I am a type 1, wing 2, and actually since last week, I'm on a little bit of a journey with my instinctual, I'm losing my words. thought I was a sexual subtype. Potentially there's been a shift that I need to kind of reassess, and so I'm just taking some time at the moment to maybe look at the different subtypes within the type 1 and just see what feels true for me right now. But usually I am a sexual subtype with I'm socially blind usually. Watch this space for our next live to see where I'm at to on my journey with that. And I think actually that's a good point just for all of us to be aware that our subtypes can move and they can shift. And actually, the last time I really looked into that was a couple of years ago now, so it might be worth looking into again. I'm also on cycle day 16, which means I'm in that first week of the luteal phase. But what that also means is I'm someone that has ADHD, and often we see cycle day 15, 16 and 17 being incredibly ADHD days. So executive function, and well, you can already see with my talking, I've got lots to say today. So I've got my notes in front of me to keep me on track, and Lindsay, you're going to keep me on track as well. But I think that's something that we can, if you are neurodivergent, that's something to be aware of. Often we see around cycle day 8 and then again on cycle day 15, 16 and 17 that we see a bit of a shift and a pull where we can, I want to use the word struggle, and I use that word personally, I'm not putting that on anybody. That is a journey for me today. So yes, I'm a little bit spacey, a little bit sleepy, I'm a little bit cozy because it's very cold here in the UK. But I'm really excited for today. Let's get into ovulation.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about the ovulation phase. Like, I think what's interesting to me, I know you're going to talk about this, is like I kind of thought that ovulation was like about a week, but then after you and I had connected, you said it's actually a day. It actually happens, but it can happen within. So like, yes, I want to know all about maybe those myths and like what really is happening sort of around that ovulation phase, like what it actually looks like and how long it is.
Yeah, totally. Well, I think this is a massive misconception. So scientifically speaking, your ovulatory day, it does last for 24 hours. This kind of peak of our cycle, this culmination of, many different hormones kind of growing and surging and peaking. And we see estrogen and testosterone really, they're fired up in this time. Technically, it lasts for one day, scientifically speaking. However, I think from a mindset point of view, and it's not just me saying this, lots of other menstrual cycle teachers and educators would say that we can kind of ooze it and squeeze it out for 3 days. And I think the way that we can do that is by preparation. We want to make the most of our ovulatory phase. It's a really fun part of the cycle. It's a really exciting part of the cycle. So we can kind of prepare for it, which is what we're going to talk about today, and make a space for it and make a way for it, rather than just kind of letting it come and go without us even realizing it, and then we've missed it again for another cycle. But when it's happening, we notice things like super increased energy. We feel like we want to be connected, and we want to have contact, and maybe even more physical touch for some of us. So we see, yes, the libido increasing, but also just this need and desire to be around others more. Creativity has a bit of a peak here, and this desire to socialize, which is really interesting when we look at it from the point of view of the Enneagram, and how all of us are kind of on a different journey with our desire and interest in socialization. Which is why I think whenever we're learning about the menstrual cycle, so important to include the Enneagram with that. Because we're all in very different bodies and we need to not just shove all bleeders into the same kind of way of living. We all have a different way of engaging with our ovulatory phase, and again we're going to talk about that a bit today. But it's a perfect time to go on a date, go on dates, plural, go to the gym, do the HIIT workout, book in to do a 10K or a Tough Mudder. I tend to only drink alcohol and drink caffeine during this time, and I tend to refrain from that during my luteal phase and whilst I'm bleeding. for a number of different reasons. But this is a great time to maybe go out for cocktails with your friends, and really enjoy that, you know, social aspect. Go out dancing, do something physical, get into your body, even if you're not in the body stance. Does all of that track? Does that kind of sum it up, do you think, in a clear way?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, from my experience during my own ovulation phase, is just that like you feel like more alive sort of during this period of time. It's like you just kind of have that like zest of energy. You feel more excited, like you are more social and engaging and all of these types of things. I think it can be confusing for people too, right? When we
Yeah.
talk about the different cycles, it's like you were this, and then, you know, I'm also a very good 9 who loves to be cozy and comfortable and like sort of like don't bother me. I don't really want people text. So it can seem like, I think for people around, especially with my particular type, is that, you know, and with the social dominance, I think it's the combination of the both. Is like I'm texting and I'm engaging and I'm talking, and then all of a sudden it's like, you know, not long after I'm like, but then now I'm not, I might take longer to respond, or like, gosh, why is somebody texting me right now? I wish they'd leave me alone. And like I mentioned last time, I don't actually want you to leave me alone. I'm just cozy. I want to stay cozy in my little blanket sitting on the couch. But I think that that is really interesting too. And I'd be really curious to see just sort of how that shows up with different types. But yes, for me, and I would say for a lot of clients in my office, it's like, this is like also like peak sexual energy and like excitement and exploration and all of those types of things. And then when that goes away, also very confusing for the partner, and especially male partners who maybe don't experience the same thing, right? But even for when I've had 2 women in a relationship, right? Like, where'd that go? What happened? Why are you not as excited anymore?
Yeah, totally, totally. And I think if we can kind of not be ruled by our by the kind of the punches of our cycle. You're tired, now you're really awake, now you've got a lot of energy, now you don't. But if we can kind of learn to live with and alongside our cycle, and then communicate that to our partners, that's going to be so much easier for everybody involved. And that's why I really think of this work not just as really great self-development, but it is also almost activism, because for so long women have had to be, you know, up for it whenever their partner is up for it, and a space for desire has just been, you know, squished. It's been non-existent, it's been not allowed. And so actually kind of taking back that almost control of, oh, actually, you know, this is how my body's feeling today, this is what my hormones are doing today, I'm going to communicate that. And actually next week when I'm in the luteal phase, or when I'm potentially in the menstrual phase, like for you today, Lindsay, I'm going to not put that pressure on myself, and I'm going to communicate that actually I'm maybe not looking for that as much. Maybe I will be, but also maybe I won't be, and that's really okay. So I think it does come back to this place of activism, which I think is really exciting, and kind of can, we're not just being selfish by spending all this time learning about ourselves. It's for other people, it's for everybody. Because also if we think about friendships as well, being able to say, I'm ovulating, could we get some time in? I'd really love to. If your friends know what you're talking about, oh, fantastic, because then in a few days' time when you're not replying to your texts as quickly, it isn't, whoa, what's going on there? It's, oh, she hit her luteal. She's tired, she's sleepy. Okay, there's a greater understanding and depth of relationship there, I think, for sure.
I think it, I mean, you talk about that, it's so important. And I think we talked about this last time, and I had not been familiar with the Stardust app, and like neither one of us, by the way, are advertisers for Stardust. But I got it and I was like, oh, it's so nice how it has all the information there, like how what a benefit would it be for me to invite some of my friends to be on there? Because I think some of my other social dominant friends as well, is like when I sort of like pull wet thin and withdraw and sort of in more of that autumn or winter phase, as sort of you have called it, which is that luteal or menstrual phase. I think that at times some of my friends have been like, is she mad at me or is she upset with me? That's like, no, not at all. I just want to withdraw and sort of be within myself. And I think just that ability to know that, right? And then it's like, and then when I'm in the ovulation phase, like, and if you know that, or the follicular phase, and it's like, that's, you know, that it's like, yes, she has more capacity and ability to connect in the ways that we want, and kind of get rid of those stories that we create around what things mean. Like, this is just more information I think that would be beneficial for friendships, and for our partners, just to know, like, this is why we appear to be four different people. We're not actually four different people, but we
Yeah.
can appear to be. Yeah.
Yeah, totally, totally. And you mentioned it just there, which is a great point, that we think of luteal phase as inner autumn, or our menstrual phase for you at the moment, Lindsay, inner winter, follicular phases, you know, inner spring, and ovulatory phases are inner summer. Now we're just coming to the end of summer, but we can kind of think about those long, hot summer days. That is kind of what's going on internally. We can kind of stay out a bit later and know that we'll have enough energy for work tomorrow. We can just invite everybody back to ours for a barbecue because, you know, the sun's out, let's be outside, let's make the most of it. And so then I often think this is fantastic to talk about as well when we're on the cusp of a season change, which is fantastic timing. We've planned this very well. But when we do move into that next phase, we can think of it as, oh yes, now the leaves are beginning to fall, my energy is beginning to dwindle. There's a big shift and change there. The more we can understand it for ourselves, the more that is going to build compassion for the other people who have those, you know, energy shifts and changes in their bodies as well. You then layer over that person's Enneagram type or their instinctual stacking. Oh, fantastic. We've got just that, as you were saying, more information to understand the, you know, the truth of what's going on without telling ourselves stories that maybe are not so true or not based totally in reality. Yeah, totally. I think as well, I did just want to mention that there is a study, just to kind of pull back to the sex chat of of ovulation, just because, Lindsay, you're such a powerhouse of knowledge. I know we're going to talk about it for in a bit, in a moment as well. But there's a study from the Journal of Evolution and Human Behavior that found that women were more open to the idea of one-night stands, sex with acquaintances, and then other adventurous sex whilst they're ovulating. So I think this is also really key to remember, that even if you're not acting on these thoughts, but you're experiencing them, you're thinking about them more, that is a part of the ovulatory phase as well. And so it doesn't mean that you have to be having lots of adventurous sex within your ovulatory phase. It doesn't mean that you're doing it wrong. There's no pressure on that. But just kind of have this kind of more experimental mindset around your sexuality during this time could be a really great way to kind of play with that and enjoy that playfulness and curiosity that comes along with that follicular and ovulatory phase. Just thought it was really interesting that we've got statistics and numbers on this stuff as well, which I think then frees us up a bit to maybe enjoy that a bit more or explore that a bit more without bringing shame or fear or the need to go and do something. It's just something we can know about ourselves and see what happens the next time we're ovulating, or just be aware of in the next time we're coming into our follicular phase, which I think is really key when we're just learning about this. If this is brand new information to you, doesn't mean you have to start acting on all these different things that we're saying, booking a HIIT workout class and inviting all your friends over and then meeting somebody at a bar. No, it just means that notice what your energy is during this time. Are you more open? Does your mind wander to this place? What's going on internally for you? And then how can you respond to that? What does that response look like for you? Taking into account your instinctual subtype, your Enneagram type, where you're at in life at the moment. I think that's really key as well.
Yeah, what I think is interesting when you talk about that as well, like one of the things I will often tell clients in my office is that you really want to have about 3 different sexual experiences within your relationship or partnerships, or just even how you are right in your life. And really what we look at is like you have like more of your quickie experience, which is just kind of getting down to it, getting the pleasure. You have your romantic, connective, sensual experiences, which is more about the emotional connection through sex. And then you have your adventurous experiences, right? And what I'm hearing you say is like, and I agree with, is that this phase is a really good phase to sort of have your hormones sort of encourage that adventurous phase, right? And I think just leaving the space for that. And I think too, a lot of us have sort of like culturally a lot of sexual shame around exploration for adventure, especially women, I think more than men in general in my experience. And it's like one of the things that I will often recommend is I actually have a book it's called A Little Bit Kinky. I call it a little vanilla kink book. It's a great book to have exploration and kind of touch into things that are like a little bit playful, a little bit adventurous, a little bit out of the box. And this is a really good time to sort of explore that, because your hormones will be more encouraging with that, and kind of that ability to push through and challenge maybe some of those shame messages that you have received around sexuality. And I will put a link to this book as well, sort of in after the live, so people can get it. It's just one that I found on Amazon. Again, I don't even really know the author. I just thought it's a wonderful little book that I have been using for like the last 6 or 7 years, and it's really opened up exploration for people because it doesn't feel overwhelming. Like I'm not going to go buy like a BDSM book, but I can be a little bit kinky and I can try something a little bit different, and it just feels very safe. So it's my vanilla kink book that I feel like all of us should explore a little bit. So I will offer that in, and I think it's just really good to see there's scientific evidence kind of backing up that this is a good time for that too as well, based on the article that you were recommending.
Yeah. Wow. Amazing. Amazing. Can I ask quickly? I think from watching your and Sam's Sexy Fridays lives, I might know, but I'd like you to answer the question. Are there 3 types that struggle? Is there a stance that struggles more with kind of shame? Relating to kind of exploration and that more adventurous sex that we're talking about? Are there any types that come to mind for you?
You know, it really is going to depend on anybody can, period. I think in particular, it would depend on messaging that you got growing up and like what's considered like good. I mean, like I would say ones in particular, right? If they're going to be more influenced by societal messages, especially your social ones around like what is good and bad around sexuality and ability to explore like what a good woman looks like what you should be or shouldn't be. So ones in particular I see struggle a little bit more with that. 6s you can as well, but 6s it becomes a little bit more, it's more complicated. For 6s.
Okay, sure. Yeah,
there's a multitude of things, but what I would say is like again, like the ones that are going to have the least amount of struggle usually are going to be your ones that have the higher desire again, which is 7, 8, and 4. But that doesn't mean that they're not going to be influenced or affected by messaging. I actually have found that culturally you can depending on what culture you come from, there can be more influence around that. And so like really more than anything, the culture that you were brought up in is going to influence or affect this piece the most. But I would say beyond that, probably ones the most are going to struggle with permission to have exploration and adventure. But once they kind of can get beyond that, then they usually are really actually quite playful, and they can move to 7 very quickly. And like it's almost like they move, it's like once they get beyond it, they really get beyond it in a different way than other types do. So it's like they kind of have both parts of that. There is not a type that I haven't seen shame exist in. It's just that some can push through it more. The social doms too, sometimes, depending on the social messages that they have received. Again, it's going to be cultural, because I've actually seen people on the opposite, where they came from, like, if I don't want extremely adventurous, open, like if a parent or their culture has been very open around sexuality and they don't feel like that's genuinely them, struggling a little bit more with, like, is it okay to like vanilla sex, right? And one of the things that I will say is all sex is healthy. Oh, the name of the book is A Little Bit Kinky. Misty, I will put it when we're all done too. I will put it in the on the chat or the comments afterwards, and I can also just DM it to you, Misty, too, because she's one of my friends. So she's also a sex therapist out of Arizona. So yeah, she's one of my Enneagram and Sexuality people. So it's awesome to see you here, Misty.
Oh, cool.
but I think what I find is like, yeah, just that complexity around it. But I've had the opposite too, where somebody maybe has like more vanilla sex and then felt like, is that okay? Because their culture is telling them they should be. And this is actually a pretty interesting dichotomy that can happen in the United States in particular, is that you should be adventurous and like all kinds of different sex, or you should be conservative, right? And it should be about your partner's pleasure. And I've seen people struggle with the messaging on both ends. Like, oh, I don't like all this kink and fetish stuff. I just want vanilla sex that's pleasurable and enjoyable, and there's something wrong with me, and then the other way. So I think that the sex becomes complex because sex isn't about sex. It's all about all these messages and everything else that we've received. And this is actually one of the reasons I really wanted to have you on, because I think, you know, our menstrual cycles, especially for women, can like help foster, like it's going to be easier to move through, right, some of those thoughts during this particular phase. For instance, like I have my hormones encouraging more adventure or exploration, and so if I'm struggling with that because I have messages, like this is probably a good time to challenge yourself a little bit around that. Probably don't do that in your menstrual phase or your luteal phase, right, where you might be more influenced by some of those thought patterns that are kind of keeping you stuck in a place you don't want to be. So I think I'm gonna say it's just complex.
Absolutely.
Long
Absolutely.
answer.
No, it's a fantastic answer. It's a fantastic answer. And I think a really important answer for us all to be aware of. And I think, yeah, I mean, we're doing slightly different work, but there is a Venn diagram where there's some crossover work for you and I for sure, and definitely for clients here in the UK. There is absolutely that push-pull between, do I have to be this? Do I have to, you know, what is it that I can be? What is it? And then it just becomes about everything else other than the person or the people in that relationship. For sure. That was a great answer. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, cool. Yes, I think I've answered everything about, yeah, should we get into the kind of the role of the Enneagram
Yeah, I was like,
within?
we've talked about the stances every time, and I think it'd be good for us to talk about kind of how those stances, you know, how they kind of show up here as well.
Yeah, totally. And they do kind of lead on really easily from follicular into the ovulatory phase. Menstrual phase into follicular, that's like a hard U-turn. Ovulatory into luteal, still a little bit of a big, you know, a shift there. And then again, luteal into menstrual, hard U-turn. So this is the easiest kind of bridge to gap in terms of hormonally. We're just kind of, you know, rising on that kind of roller coaster, as it were. We're getting to the top of the roller coaster. So there's not such huge changes. I would love to start with talking about the assertive stance, because I think, you know, on paper, this is a really easy place for these guys to be. You know, it's kind of everything that they want, all guns blazing. Let's go, go, go. Let's get loads of work done. Let's see all of our friends. Let's do a lot. Let's be a lot. Let's show up. Let's win. Let's be successful. You know, let's go to every single party we can manage going to. Fantastic. However, I think it can be difficult. You know, our assertive stance people are so in the future. It can be difficult for them to kind of be present in the moment and realize that not everybody is in their ovulatory phase, and not everybody wants to go 100 miles an hour. And actually, some people are never going to move as fast as them, and that is okay. That's all right. It's okay that there's a gap and a difference between you and them. And actually, how can we find compassion in that, especially in the workplace? I think this can be a real moment where the space, the gap between assertive stance and non-assertive stance can really show up. And then again in our personal relationships as well. So I think that's something that we really need to be aware of. Not everybody's going to run as fast as you. Not everybody's going to want to run as fast as you. And you know, if we're thinking about relationships, if we're thinking, you know, assertive stance, ovulatory phase, and then withdrawing stance, luteal phase, that is just, we're miles apart there in terms of energy and desire and interest levels. So I think that's something that we have to hold. whilst on paper, yes, assertive stance are going to love this, there has to be kind of an awareness for the room or the relationships that we're in. Does that track for you in your work as well, Lindsay, do you think?
I would completely agree. Yeah. And I think that too, like even with the assertive stance, like even you know where you have a heterosexual relationship, sometimes the women that are in the assertive stance like will dominate their partners, and they'll be like, whoa, like slow down a little bit, maybe a little bit softer, maybe a little bit nice. You know, it's like I think it's just really interesting too, and you'll see it increase in this a little bit. I've noticed during this for them as well. Taking charge, which partners like, but sometimes can be too much depending on how you're doing it.
Yeah, yeah. And that's really where that communication is going to come in, you know, because actually, if that's okay and all guns blazing, go for it, great. But let's make sure that we're having some really conscious communication around this phase and actually around all the phases to make sure that, you know, both parties are involved and are kind of, you know, they're alongside each other rather than where are you? Okay, cool. And then let's talk about compliance stance. You know, as we said with the follicular phase, this is the perfect time to overcommit and promise the absolute world with absolutely no way of being able to back that up in a week's time when we're moving into the second half of our luteal phase. And so I think, you know, we want the compliant stance. We're, you know, time tethered to the here, the right now. That's why I was saying, yes, yes, I can do that. Yes, yes, that feels good. That feels great to be able to meet all these different needs. And yet we need to, you know, have the ability to see into the future and realize that is not going to be possible. And so how can I show up fully whilst also recognizing my ability and my capability within the next 2-3 weeks of my cycle before I'm back in this lovely, wonderful, oozy, juicy place. And then withdrawing stance, you know, the whole thing can just kind of feel a bit overwhelming, this move into the ovulatory phase. What is my body communicating to me? What, I don't know what's going on. How do I, what's all of this? It's overwhelming. And so I think, again, for everybody, for all the stances, it's about planning. And that is just the most type 1 response you could possibly come up with. I'm sorry for that. But I do think the more that we can inhabit our cycle rather than it happening to us, my period pain, you know, I'm feeling all these feelings, I don't know what to do with them. I'm feeling really tired and I've booked on to do, you know, a 5K with my friend. Oh, let's move away from that. Let's make sure that we're driving the bus, that we know what's coming, what's happening, and, you know, plan in how we'd like to engage with our ovulatory phase. All of this is coming back to choices. You can engage with it however you want. You know, what you and I are doing here today, Lindsay, is, you know, putting out a kind of some possible ways to engage with it. But actually, if you don't want to engage with it at all in that way, if you want to, or if your body's communicating to you, actually, I'm just tired. Actually, it's been a really busy summer and I'm just finding my feet with the new September routine. Totally fine. And so just to speak, you know, from personal experience, I actually traveled during my menstrual phase this cycle. That is something I never normally do, but we were traveling with friends. It's the only dates we could find. We make allowances. I really wanted to go on the trip. But that has meant that my follicular and ovulatory phase was really tired and quiet. You know, it was a very gentle follicular phase where, yes, I you know, there was the burn and the awakeness in my eyes. If we go back to, you know, the our previous live, you can kind of see that in me. But actually, I wasn't killing it in the gym. I wasn't meeting friends out for dinner. I wasn't hosting anything. It was a very gentle version of my ovulation. And so this is what we're trying to do here when we're thinking about cycle syncing, when we're thinking about living in tune with our body. It's just to allow for more choices rather than feeling afraid or overwhelmed by what our body's communicating to us. How can we plan ahead? I knew if I traveled, you know, especially to Italy, where I was going to be drinking a lot of espresso and, you know, some glasses of red wine, delightful. that is going to have an effect for the rest of my cycle. So let's make sure I plan in appropriately what that looks like, and then not be annoyed at myself as a type 1 when my ovulation is pretty sleepy, very gentle. That's okay. That is definitely allowed as well. That is a very type 1 answer. I'm just playing it over in my head now.
Well, I when I was hearing you say that too, it's like it is very interesting too, because, you know, for instance, for me, there was like, you know, I would say I was more in a fog in like July and August, because there's kids are at home, there's the money for school to start, all of these types of things, which you know, I'm very comfortable in sort of being in that kind of like what I call that fog, which is not a great place for a 9 to actually live, but we're comfortable there, right? And there kind of has been that ability to kind of come out of that starting in September. And I think that like what you're saying is just because we're talking about these different phases doesn't mean that different things aren't happening, because we're still influenced by the context of our lives, right? But being more in sync with that is like, and it was interesting because I actually was more like, okay, like this is follicular, this is ovulation, like I'm going to do some more intense workouts, like HIIT and things like that. And like I intentionally picked a yoga class yesterday versus doing like cardio kickboxing at home, because that's where I knew probably was better of an exercise choose for my body, right, of where what my body needed. And so like that part, I think, is it's like those are some of the things that we do have kind of control over and decisions to make, right? Where it's like I could have tried to push through and do a HIIT class, but it probably would have been really hard. And that's one of the things I've noticed sort of from the things that I've been learning from you, is it's like, oh, like I was trying to push through even during the menstrual phase to do a HIIT class, and like it was really hard. And I'm like, why am I doing this? And instead, it's like, well, why don't I flip it and do the exercises like the yoga and the like plyo and things like that that are slower and still great for your body and still strength building and still heart beating, but like my body actually likes it better. And so I just love that idea of being more in tune with that, but also not giving ourselves a hard, like you said, like, I'm not going to give myself a hard time if I'm not like doing all the things that like I should, which you're right. Ones are probably like, oh my gosh, this is what I should be doing. And now that's not the intention here. Like more or less, like I think it's like, how can we capitalize upon the hormones to give us those types of things? I can't believe it. This went really quick again. Like we are actually at the end of the time as well. We're going to come back next week and we're going to talk all about the luteal phase. So kind of the going back into that inner autumn, which is the language I have heard you use around that, and talking a little bit about how we, where we are physically, relationally, sexually, sort of at that period as well. And if this is the first one that you watched and you missed the other ones, like, you know, either you can direct message me and I can like link you in or send you a link to where they are. Otherwise, there is also the follicular and the menstrual phase on our pages for you to go back to and kind of see the whole series, because you could be like, well, what about the other two? Well, they're there to look at as well. But why don't you share some of the things that you have going on as well, Evie, and then we'll kind of wrap up for today.
Yes, totally. It has gone so quickly. Yes, I'm offering one-to-one coaching. I've got a few spaces left for October. If Christina, that is so lovely. Christina Joyful, what a fantastic name. Thank you so much. Yes, I've got some spaces available in October and November for one-to-one coaching. I have a whole course called Synced, where you can learn all about your Enneagram type and your menstrual cycle and how they intersect and interact together so that you can really live at home in your body. So if that's that, if this work is interesting to you, let's jump on a 30-minute discovery call and yes, see if working together could be beneficial for you at this time. But that's what I'm working mainly on at the moment, Lindsay.
Yeah, and we have Sexy First Friday is actually next week already. So, you know, Sam and I do Sexy First Friday. If you want to learn more about Enneagram, sexuality, and relationships, we actually do that every first Friday at 12 p.m. Central Time. So you can join us for that. And then we also have Sexy Chat that's just starting to happen as well on the third Friday at 12 p.m. as well. And I believe you're going to join us in that Sexy Chat the next time as well. So please please join us. Don't hesitate to DM us. And like, we are really excited to be wrapping up this series with the luteal phase. And thank you. That's a very nice comment too as well, Christina. It's nice to hear that you're getting a lot out of the experience. All right. Well, have a wonderful Tuesday, and we'll see you all next week.
Bye, Lindsay. Thanks so much for today. Bye.
Bye.